Morning, Dr. Desu. Morning, Your Excellency.
Very good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're very welcome.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Sorry for the delay. We're just waiting for Madabio to log in as well. Maybe in the meantime, I'll just welcome everyone. Thank you so much, and good morning to everyone, to our esteemed speakers, to our participants that are present today. Your Excellency Ambassador Osama Abdelkhalik, who is jointly organizing this event with Amani Africa and launching this report on women, peace and security, and the 10 years review, of course, of the PSC engagement on this very important agenda. Thank you very much for joining us, Your Excellency SRSG Hannah Tete as well, for giving us your time and for being able to speak for this event. And in terms of, so for the moderation, we really apologize. We will not be able to be joined by Ambassador Kamara. Very last minute urgent issue came up. So I'll just I'll just give the floor to Ambassador Osama Khalik as well to give the opening remarks, and then we will move to the speakers, and then we'll have the presentation of the report, and then we will conclude our session. Ambassador Osama, I'll give you the floor.
Thank you very much, my distinguished sister. Good morning to SRSG, my dear sister Hannah Tete, Her Excellency, and Dr. Solomon Dersu, and all the distinguished audience with us, Excellencies, distinguished ambassadors and colleagues. I welcome you all. It gives me great pleasure to co-host today's event with Amani Africa and my dear brother, Dr. Solomon Dersu, in my capacity as the current chairperson of the African Union Peace and Security Council. It's a wonderful opportunity for me to contribute to bring visibility to this valuable special report by Amani Africa on 10 years review of the Women, Peace and Security Agenda at the Peace and Security Council, and also to the work of Amani Africa at large, of which I am always so proud as a respectable homegrown African research institute. So pleased to be virtually surrounded by two eminent and esteemed main speakers, Her Excellency Hannah Tete, UN Under Secretary General and head of United Nations Office to the African Union, and Her Excellency, my dear sister Benita Diop, once she joins us. She's, of course, the African Union chairperson of the Commission Special Envoy for Women, Peace and Security Agenda. Yet the biggest source of pleasure is that this report is concerning the implementation of United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325 by the African Union Peace and Security Council. It was a distinct privilege that Egypt presidency of the African Union Peace and Security coincided with the 15th anniversary of the adoption of 1325 resolution, and also with the commemoration of the 20th anniversary of Beijing Conference on Women. On 5th of this October, we held a very useful open debate dedicated to the commemoration of 15 years of 1325. Egypt presidency of the council made sure that the commemoration is held at its annual timing, and more importantly, to be held before the similar session to be held by UN Security Council on the 29th of this month. It was important for our council to demonstrate the continental commitment to the agenda and also to showcase the progress achieved 15 years after. Distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, women, peace and security is indeed a universal agenda and an international framework. Yet for us in Africa, it acquires special significance and distinct importance. The data speaks truth. Africa is the home for the biggest number of armed conflict and post-conflict experiences. Africa is the place where women and girls suffer highest indexes of violence, sexual exploitation, and human rights abuses during armed conflicts. Equally important, Africa is the place where thousands of women and girls and civil society organizations are undertaking resilience and recovery activities, sometimes without even being recognized or labeled or as peace builders. For these considerations, among others, Africa was upfront and center in the elaboration and implementation of the Women, Peace and Security Agenda. Namibia was a co-pen holder of UN Security Council Resolution 1325. By now, more than 30 African Union member states developed their national action plans of implementation of this milestone resolution, and more than half of these countries reported on their implementation of these national action plans. As I have mentioned in my introductory remarks on the 5th of October, Egypt is currently developing its own national plan of action. In Egypt, albeit we are not a country in armed conflict or emerging from one, we decide to approach the issue from a wider perspective. We continue to strengthen our capabilities, train our deployed peacekeepers, increase our women participation in peacekeeping operations, extend capacity support to fellow African countries via CCPA, which is the Cairo Center for Peacekeeping Training, and our National Council of Women, and to undertake our duties continentally and globally in mainstreaming the women, peace and security, including through the Leadership Circle Initiative, the Zero Tolerance Policy, and FemWise activities here in Africa. Distinguished participants, at the African Union, we take pride of having a dedicated special envoy for women, peace and security since 2014, that we have a continental, my dear sister, of course, Benita Diop, and that we have a continental framework for results and reporting, that we hold an annual open debate on this subject in the Council, mounting up to 18 sessions since 2010 in general, if you add them up, that we have a specialized program for gender, peace and security under the African Peace and Security Architecture. We also have a solid and satisfactory normative framework that bases itself on international norms, such as the African Charter for Human and People Rights, the Maputo Protocol, and the 2004 Solemn Declaration on Gender Equality, as well as the plethora of relevant assembly and peace and security declarations, decisions, and communications. There is also stable consensus concerning the pivotal status of women, peace and security agenda in the context of the implementation of the African Union Master Roadmap on silencing the guns in Africa. With this rich and reliable frame of reference, during the last open debate by PSC, the collective call was for focus for strengthened and sustained implementation and addressing in deficits in performance, particularly while taking into account the current difficulties and challenges posed by the novel COVID-19 pandemic. The Council identified a number of key issues vis-à-vis implementation that were highlighted at the press release issued regarding this session. I take the liberty to highlight these takeaways in this specific connection. Ending violence and sexual exploitation against women and girls in conflict and post-conflict situations should remain an utmost priority, including the specific abuses perpetrated by terrorist groups. Accountability and ending impunity side by side with capacity building and increasing the role of men and boys are key words and notions. Increased and sustainable participation of women in mediation, peacekeeping, and peace building, as well as decision making, should remain a consistent area of focus in implementing peace and security, peace accords and negotiating new ones. Women, peace and security should be a cross-cutting theme in all activities envisioned under the African Union post-conflict and reconstruction and development policy, including through the Cairo African Dedicated Center. Coordination and synergy between the different actors is not a luxury. UN, international partners, African Union Commission, FemWise, and national governments need to continue to sketch our ways and means to enhance collaboration and minimize duplications. Continental and national ownership of the agenda is crucial for success. This necessitates a balanced approach that ensures equal emphasis on the 4 pillars of protection, prevention, participation, assistance, and relief, as well as observing respect for societal and cultural specificities of the countries concerned. Mobilization of resources through local allocations as well as viable partnership is a major prerequisite for implementation. Further support is required for the Office of the Special Envoy. I meant the African Union Special Envoy. My dear sister Benita Diop, I welcome you. She has just joined us. And further support is required for that very important pivotal office, and a lot of our us in the African Union truly believes in so and truly believe in so, and we're doing so actually gradually. Since the general mood is geared up towards implementation, I consider today's report as a positive added value. Amani Africa has made a terrific effort in compiling and analyzing the outcomes of the Council AUPSC on women, peace and security related issue for an entire decade, and provided us with a coherent assessment and useful lessons learned that I'm confident will help the key stakeholders in stepping up the tempo of implementation during the year of 1325+15. I'm also hopeful that this report constitutes a useful food for thought for the report that was mandated by the PSC in 2018 concerning the state of implementation of women and children related outcomes of the Council. More than this, I will be preempting the presentation of the report as well as the most useful presentation that will be delivered by my 2 distinguished sisters, Her Excellency Hannah Teti and Her Excellency Benita Diop. So I will leave it here and join you in benefiting from the renowned line of speakers. I thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. And for also raising a very critical issue around the need for to make the women, peace and security agenda a very cross-cutting issue, and the importance around coordination among the various actors at the national and regional as well as global level, as well as the support needed for these policy mechanisms, including the Office of the Special Envoy, and also highlighting the importance of implementations of decisions. All those points are very critical, and thank you very much for setting the tone for this panel. And now I would like to give the floor to Her Excellency SRSG Hannah Teti. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. Your Excellency, Ambassador Osama Abdel Khalek, my brother, thank you very much for your kind words. The permanent representative of Egypt to the African Union and the AU Peace and Security Council chairperson for the month of October. Your Excellency, Madame Benita Diop, the AU Special Envoy for Women, Peace and Security. Dr. Solomon Derso, the founding director of Amani Africa. Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. First, let me begin by commending the Embassy of Egypt and Amani Africa for organizing this event to launch Amani Africa's report titled 10 Years Review of the Women, Peace and Security Agenda of the AU Peace and Security Council. The African Union Peace and Security Council has done a commendable job to ensure that women, peace and security issues and the Women, Peace and Security Agenda is at the core of its work. And in providing the normative guidance for the African Union and its member states over the last 10 years. The Peace and Security Council has also consistently provided an opportunity to women, particularly those at the forefront of conflict prevention, mediation, and peace-building efforts, the opportunity to present their views during the open sessions. These presentations have enriched the Council's deliberations and the efforts, our collective efforts, towards achieving the AU's flagship initiative of silencing the guns. I would also like to pay tribute to my sister, Her Excellency, Madame Benita Diop, the AU Special Envoy for Women, Peace and Security, for the concerted efforts and commitment towards advancing the Women, Peace and Security Agenda and specifically highlighting and addressing the plight of African women and girls in conflict situations. My office, the United Nations Office to the African Union, works closely with the Office of the Special Envoy. We have supported various initiatives, and our Deputy Secretary General, together with other colleagues, have joined the Special Envoy in various UN-AU solidarity missions on women, peace, and security over the last 3 years. Given the situation we have currently with the COVID pandemic, it's difficult to see how we are going to immediately be able to continue this, but we hope that once we return to normalcy, this will resume as a joint activity between the United Nations and the African Union. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, this year we mark the 20th anniversary of the Security Council Resolution 1325, with both a celebration of the achievements made so far, notably the key milestones gained globally as well as across our continent in the establishment of robust normative and policy framework on women, peace, and security. We have is with implementation. If well implemented, the existing institutional frameworks should enable us to build on the achievements of the last 2 decades and to emerge even stronger in the years to come. The anniversary provides us with an opportunity for reflection about what still needs to be done, how we should go about achieving those objectives, and how to continue to mobilize support at all levels as we implement the agenda, and how to remind our member states that implementing the Women, Peace and Security agenda, especially for countries that are in conflict or emerging from conflict, is not a luxury. It is essential to building stable, peaceful societies. The joint United Nations African Union framework for enhanced partnership in peace and security provides for collaboration between our 2 organizations throughout the various stages of the conflict cycle, from preventive diplomacy, mediation, peacekeeping, peace enforcement, and peace building. The partnership includes coordination on gender as a cross-cutting issue in conflict prevention and peace operations. And that's one of the reasons why my office has prioritized support for the Women, Peace and Security agenda, including the support to the deployment of FemWise women mediators, supporting gender mainstreaming for AU peace operations, and using good offices not only to broker peace, but to ensure the inclusion of women and youth in peace processes and in the implementation of peace agreements, as well as promoting intergenerational dialogue. The COVID-19 pandemic has undoubtedly caused disruptions in our efforts, as I just mentioned, which were aimed at enhancing the inclusion and effective participation of women in conflict prevention, mediation, and peace-building processes. But what the pandemic has also illustrated quite clearly is the need for a broader and more comprehensive definition of conflict, peace, and security. The absence of war or armed conflict does not, as we all know, necessarily equate to peace. Other forms of violence and disruptions to the activities of women and young people also pose a threat to their lives. At present, the Women, Peace and Security agenda specifically focuses on the importance of women involved in peace processes. However, in order to effectively empower women in the context of the largely male-dominated world of policy-making and peace processes, 1325 should be understood to focus more broadly on other forms of disruption and violence that affect women and girls, as well as greater inclusion and empowerment for the section for women and girls, as we know, as half of our society. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the recent reviews in the past years of implementing the Women, Peace and Security agenda have illustrated to us just how much needs to be done. Last week, I participated in a dialogue that involved 2 young ladies, one from South Sudan and the other from Libya. And it was a bit depressing to hear how, even though these are 2 young women who want to be part of building their country's future, they don't have a seat at the table. And organizations they are part of don't have a seat at the table. And you have to ask yourselves, if we don't include our young women, How are we building our future? And so I would very much like to request the AU Peace and Security Council, in its considerations of specific country situations, to ask for a specific review on how women and the youth are being included in peace building in those situations. Because requesting for specific information on those issues to involve them and what is being done in order to ensure that we have more inclusive peace building processes. Evidence shows that the level of impunity continues amidst violence against women, and the financing of the relevant institutions that would support the women, peace and security agenda continues to dwindle. The protection and security of women peace builders and commensurate funding has not been prioritized enough. Yet we all know that their efforts are critical. The pandemic has exacerbated the threats faced by women in many places, and the UN and member states have a key role to play in providing these peacemakers and peace builders with physical protection, international legitimacy, and recognition and resources to continue to fund their important work. And I hope that as the African Union's Peace Fund comes on stream, and that activities will be supported with financing from the Peace Fund, that the Women, Peace and Security agenda will also be supported by the Peace Fund. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as we mark the 20th anniversary, I would like to remind us of some of the unfinished work that lies ahead. First, partnerships forged at the normative level in this area are absolutely critical. As an example, the UN has made it clear that all UN entities have the responsibility to mainstream gender and to implement the Women, Peace and Security agenda. This is a good practice that in our partnership with the AU has yielded positive results in enhancing the voices of African women in peace negotiations, but we need to take it a step further. We need to make sure that they are involved in all stages of implementation. Secondly, women mediators at the different levels of peace-building processes ought to be supported through concrete and innovative ways. The normative frameworks should be implemented to their benefit. It's not enough for us to say that we have 30 national action plans if we don't see that those 30 national action plans are actually being implemented in a way that allows women to have a seat at the table. And thirdly, as we envisage synergies with AU bodies, forming the existing Women, Peace and Security architecture and other relevant mechanisms, including the Gender, Peace and Security Program and human rights mechanisms, I would like to call for more inclusive and participatory conceptualization of processes with an intended goal of delivering results that women in conflict areas need most. The fourth in this unfinished agenda is an urgent call for data-driven responses. Collecting gender disaggregated data is essential to ensure that COVID-19 responses reflect an understanding of how the pandemic affects women. At the same time, the pandemic has made data collection more difficult, but this calls for a coordinated, risk-sensitive approach to data collection, especially when it comes to sexual and gender-based violence. I think that as we celebrate this 20th anniversary, let us commit ourselves to setting the bar higher, to doing more than we have done, to ensure that we create inclusive societies, that we build peace in a way that allows for peace and stability and for a consolidation of that peace, and to ensure that going forward, we demonstrate our commitment to inclusiveness. Thank you very much, Excellencies, for your kind attention. And Ambassador Osama, thank you very much also for the brief that you gave on the efforts that Egypt is making in this regard. I think that they are extremely commendable and they will show leadership lessons for other countries on the continent that do not have conflict challenges, but are also committed to implementing the Women, Peace and Security agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, SRS Johanna Tete, for that very comprehensive presentation and for really highlighting the key issues around inclusion, around the representation of women in mediation in all cycle of conflicts, And that is a very important recommendation, as well as highlighting the role of the PSC and how the PSC can also consider and include the specific experiences and interests and needs of women in its various deliberations, in its decisions. And also the recommendations around the data-driven policies and responses, those are very much well received, and thank you very much for that intervention. And now I would also like to welcome Madame Diop. Thank you very much for joining us, and I would also like to give you the floor. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, Madam Moderator. Good morning, Your Excellency Ambassador Osama Abdelkalek, the permanent representative, our brother of Egypt, and chairperson of the Peace and Security Council for the months of October 2020. Also, let me recognize my dear sister, Madam Anna Tete, Your Excellency, the Under-Secretary General and Head of UN Office to the African Union, UNOAU. And Your Excellency, Dr. Solomon Derso, the chairperson of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights and chair of Amani, Africa. And all protocol observed, duly observed. Good morning again, and thank you for inviting me at this launch of the Amani Africa Special Report and looking on 10 years on women, peace and security agenda in our continent and at the AU Peace and Security Council. Let me really congratulate our brother, Your Excellency Ambassador Osama, for spearheading this month as Egypt ambassador, but also your own leadership. Today we are again, you celebrate the month by starting with the Women, Peace and Security the first day. It demonstrates your commitment to this agenda in our continent. I think that with your leadership and the recommendation you made, I'm sure that we will move forward in 2020 and 2021 in implementation of the WPS agenda. I also recognize my sister, Madam Anna Tete, for her leadership in promoting the Women, Peace and Security agenda and supporting my mandate in the African Union. She just recently launched the 20 women leaders in peace building to celebrate women that are at the forefront of the fighting against exclusion of women at the table. So my sister, thank you, and I thank your office for supporting our work. I would like to begin my intervention by expressing also the appreciation, not just my sister and my brother, but also the Amani Africa, for the resource put into preparing this report. The report is necessary because of the anniversary of 1325, but also within the Africa context. I think it's a great opportunity to ask ourselves questions about progress and jointly explore opportunities for improvement. I believe that the starting point for our discussion today is to highlight important point or issue which start from the 223rd meeting of the AU Peace and Security Council that put the African Union a definite role and leadership on WPS in motion. In that landmark meeting, the Peace and Security Council emphasized 3 key points. First, the need to ensure adoption of key instruments that guide our work with engaging women in conflict contexts. Second, Council emphasized continuous reporting, not just to the Council, but to the AU Assembly on implementation of the requirement from the various instruments that guide our engagement on WPS. And third, the need to ensure representation and leadership in driving the agenda on the continent. This includes promoting women leadership and in civil society structure, but also women's organization, but in particular women at the table. I think it has been highlighted in all the speeches this morning, and we will continue to say the need for women to be sitting in peace negotiation and leading conflict resolution in the continent. And also one area that the recommendation by Council was that the appointment of the special envoy on women, peace and security. Since I took office in 2014, one of our key priority that was to really make sure that we work with member states to enhance monitoring and reporting on the implementation of WPS. We know that the continent have many instruments, but delivery on commitment remains limited, as it has been emphasized by previous speaker. From the start, it has been imperative to drive and support action, not only with member states, but also at the regional level, at the REX level. So we can say that we continue to support member states in developing their national action plan. Egypt is on the process of developing and adopting a national action plan, and we are working with our sister and our brother in Egypt by providing our support to them to finalize their national action plan. The joint effort has resulted in Africa, as it was mentioned, but Africa being leading the world, because we have 30 national action plan right now. We always know where we come from and how we are making progress. And even at the regional level now, we have 6 regional economic communities that have adopted regional action plan, which means that if one country have not adopted and the region adopt a plan, we can measure the progress within the regional mechanism. So, but we are not be guided that the presence of national action plan will certainly lead to an improved condition for the agenda. It is critical to strengthen capacity at all levels and to ensure women leaders emerge to lead the implementation of the agenda, both within state structure and non-state state structure, including civil society and those who are really in areas of conflict. In this context, I would like to highlight, among others, the institutionalization of the network called FemWise that have been also mentioned by a previous speaker. It's a key structure for narrowing the gap between commitment for women's inclusion in peace processes and implementation. I think the fact that we are deploying the FemWise in our representation is a starting point, and we need to make sure that they accompany the women and support them. One case that we have right now is in Mali. UN Women and my office are supporting the Malian women to make sure that they are at the table and they can contribute to the reconstruction or to the process that put in place for Mali to get out of their crisis. And FemWise is one of the partners that are critical in supporting that process. Similarly, the African Women Leaders Network, which was established by women leaders themselves with the support of AU and UN Women, as an African-wide movement to drive women leadership for the transformation of Agenda 2063 and also Agenda 2030. We conducted solidarity mission that have been mentioned, women leadership in a fragile context. It has now established 25 national chapters, and we can say that in the Mali context, socio-political crisis is the national chapter of Mali that is driving to galvanize the women leadership, as we said, at the local level. So we need to have that kind of platform to help us to reach out to those who are in need. On the reporting agenda, we are clear that we need to separate noise from action, as we cannot improve what we cannot measure. We are noticeably clear about the need to not measure platitudes, but real changes in the life of our key constituents, women and girls. In this context, my office continued to drive for accountability through the annual chairperson report as mandated by Peace and Security Council. In addition, we have developed, as it was also mentioned, the Continental Result Framework, not just as a reporting tool, but also as a tool to standardize and harmonize reporting across member states. We continue to work with country to provide additional capacity support to member states on reporting to ensure more countries continue to use the CRF to hold themselves accountable and peer review on the continent. This was highlighted during the last Peace and Security Council open debate, which was under the leadership of His Excellency Ambassador Osama on Monday, 5th October 2020. Council reiterated that member state commitment and the centrality of this agenda in building peace and silencing the gun in Africa. I really, again, thank Council for taking into consideration the outcome, the discussion of the second report. I'm not going to highlight some of the critical issues have been done by Ambassador in his speech, but also by my sister Anna on the need to continuously protect women, but also make sure that they lead peace processes. And again, an appeal to Ambassador on the financing is very critical at this moment that we have the crisis on COVID and the conflict crisis at the table. So finally, it goes without saying that any undertaking carry the load of challenges. I thank Amani Africa for highlighting some of these challenges and welcome such analysis that will certainly reinforce our resolve to do better in partnership with other key stakeholders. We have consistently worked with various institutions and offices to drive commitment and implementation within their own structure. And I just wanted to give an example as Dr. Derso is leading the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. An example is the work that we have done with the African Commission and the Special Rapporteur in the development and publication of the guidelines on prevention of gender-based violence. I think this is kind of partnership, like I have mentioned, the partnership with UN, but also our own institution, African institution. I will end this note by highlighting the commitment by the leadership, Musa Faki Mohammed, the chairperson of the African Union Commission, and the commitment of all the commission to continue to empower various units to push toward the goal, despite the challenges that we have all mentioned. This is important because progress will be impossible without that level of ownership at the highest level within our own institution and under the guidance of the Peace and Security Council. Thank you once again. Dr. Salomo and your team at Amani for the good work, and we take it positively, and we do expect that we can explore some collaboration around the recommendation in this report. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Madam Bineta Diop, for this very comprehensive presentation and for welcoming the recommendations as well of the report, and for giving us this very comprehensive highlight of the evolution of the Women, Peace and Security agenda within the AU, as well as how giving us the particular cases that happened in Mali as well, and the various partnerships that were built with FemWise, but also with the key mandate holders within the African Commission on Human People's Rights, and the highlights also that were given on the Continental Results Framework in terms of standardizing, reporting, and monitoring. Thank you very much for those highlights. And I believe all these points have also given me a very good way to start this presentation on the report. But I'll be very much brief because a lot of the issues have already been raised and extensively being dealt with by the speakers, in the opening remarks, as well as by our esteemed speakers, Madam Bineta Diop, as well as SRSG Hannah Tete. So I'll just be very brief in terms of presenting the main findings of the report. So this report was, of course, produced based on the review of the past 10 years, the past decade of the PSC engagement on the Women, Peace and Security agenda. And based on this review, the report also identifies policy recommendation in terms of going ahead and going forward in advancing this agenda. This particular month, of course, it's very important in terms of commemorating the 20th anniversary of the UN Security Council Resolution 1325. But it's also, this report is also a recognition of the 10th anniversary of the PSC, where the PSC made a landmark decision to dedicate a standing issue on the agenda of the Women, Peace and Security. And it documents the genesis and the evolution of the Women, Peace and Security agenda within the PSC space. So the presentation will broadly look at how the agenda was produced at the Council, how it was addressed over the years, and what kind of changes took place in the past decade, and what are the main milestones, and what can be done more to improve in terms of promoting and advancing the Women, Peace and Security agenda. So when we talk about the PSC space, of course, it's very important to contextualize and to understand the agenda within the broader AU policies and legal instruments. And in this regard, I think foundational instruments of the AU Constitutive Act, as well as the PSC protocol, have given a very wide recognition to the agenda itself. The AU itself has, of course, taken various measures in terms of implementing the gender parity principle through the appointment of commissioners. Moreover, key landmark instruments such as the adoption of the Maputo Protocol was a key instrument to advance the rights of women. Of course, the protocol provides specific protection measures for women, not only in times of peace, but also in times of crisis and armed conflicts. Additionally, we have policies such as the Solemn Declaration on Gender Equality, as well as the AU strategy, the AU strategy for gender equality and women's empowerment. So all this kind of AU instruments have laid the foundation for the PSC to engage further on this particular agenda. So the first step during the 223rd PSC session, during this inaugural landmark kind of PSC session on the Women, Peace and Security agenda, was held following an assembly decision. And after that, of course, the PSC also decided to hold regular sessions on this thematic issue. And although initially the Women, Peace and Security agenda was jointly considered with the women, with the children affected by armed conflict issue, increasingly these two agendas became more separate, particularly after 2014 onwards, from 2014 onwards, the Women, Peace and Security agenda became much more standalone, and it was increasingly being considered separately. So this is an important step in the evolution of the Women, Peace and Security agenda. So the frequency as well has also increased within the PSC. In addition to the March session, another additional session was added in October, and throughout the year, additional sessions were taking place on Women, Peace and Security agenda. So all this kind of played a key role in institutionalizing and consolidating the agenda within the PSC. In addition, of course, we have the appointment of the Special Envoy, the Office of the Special Envoy has also played a very critical role. The launch of the Gender, Peace and Security Program, as well as the launch of the FemWise. All this is a combination of, which is a demonstration as well of the commitment of the Commission in terms of promoting the agenda further. So between 2010 and 2019, for the past almost 10 years, there were about 18 sessions that were held on women, peace and security. A number of decisions were made with regards to participation, with regards to women's representation, protection, and access to justice. And it can be observed from the various sessions, from the outcome of the various sessions, that there is a wealth of policy instruments, there is a wealth of decisions. However, of course, the implementation gap is still remains, and it requires further follow-up. Despite these decisions, for example, on the continuous decision to end impunity, to enhance protection of women in conflict situations, there is still no follow-up mechanism, for example, to regularly monitor and track to what extent this decision has been implemented. The other issue, which also has been mentioned earlier, is the concept around the gender mainstreaming, and how gender mainstreaming, particularly in the work of the Peace and Security Council, beyond these dedicated sessions, beyond these annual sessions, to what extent, for example, regular country and region-specific briefings of the PSC actually have gender component. To what extent do they consider the particular experiences of women whenever the PSC considers country or region-specific issues? So this is also very important in terms of capturing the voices and the experiences of women. The other issue is in terms of the level of implementation. There was, of course, a decision which Ambassador Osama also mentioned. There was a decision in 2018, for instance, to convene, to actually have, to prepare a report, like an evaluation report of the PSC decisions that were made since 2010. This report is an important tool to track the decision and the level, the extent to which decisions have been implemented. But this report is yet to be presented to the PSC, and it's yet to be considered, but it's something that definitely that needs to be followed up. And additionally, of course, the PSC also requested for the Office of the Special Envoy also to provide quarterly briefings. Again, this also needs to be further institutionalized. I think one of the most important achievements, as well mentioned by Her Excellency Madame Diop, is also the development of the Continental Results Framework, which was adopted in 2018. And it's a very important tool in terms of course, systematizing reporting and the accountability process. And the Office of the Special Envoy, of course, has also submitted reports using this particular tool. In 2019, the first one, and the most recent one, of course, during the course of this month, earlier on in October 2020, under Egypt's chairpersonship of the PSC. So a lot of findings can also be highlighted in the 2019 report of the Special Envoy, which also identifies a number of gaps, particularly on issues of increasing women's representation. The PSC, of course, has repeatedly called for the increased number of women in the AU liaison offices and peace support operations. But as noted in the report, for example, from the 12 AU offices in Africa, only 3 missions have gender advisors, and in AMSOM, women represent only 3% of forces. So these are the kind of key findings that need to fit in to the decision-making process of the PSC and other, of course, policy organs and decision-making organs. And back in 2016, the Special Envoy report again noted that only the Special Envoy herself, the Special Envoy Women, Peace and Security herself was the only Special Envoy at the moment. But currently we have about 3. But again, this also shows a very limited women representation even within the African Union. Even when we look at the PSC composition, the Peace and Security Council composition, we have currently we have only about 3 ambassadors, women ambassadors that represent members within the council. So all this is a demonstration again that further work needs to be done in terms of increasing women's representation, but also their meaningful kind of representation in decision-making process. One thing, as a concluding remark maybe, I'll just highlight some of the key recommendations maybe that came out from this report. Of course, the CRF, the Continental Results Framework, is an important tool in tracking implementation of member states, as well as the African Union Commission, but it's also important to track the decisions of the Peace and Security Council, particularly the ones that are still pending. Moreover, the reporting and monitoring of the Women, Peace and Security agenda should be an integral part of the work of the various AU liaison offices located in the different parts of the continent, as well as the peace support operations. There is also a need for women, peace and security issues to be addressed in specific conflict situations, which are considered by the Peace and Security Council. There are recurrent agendas that are very much regularly tabled on the agenda of the Peace and Security Council. Those conflict situations and region-specific situations need that gender lens that particularly need to capture the women's experience and women's voices. The other issue is that, of course, the Women, Peace and Security agenda is a very broad and comprehensive program that stretches over a number of policy mechanisms and the departments. So in this context, the coordination, the collaboration among the various mandate holders is very much critical. In terms of the global partnership, which is absolutely important and very strategic, it's also important to consolidate the Women, Peace and Security agenda within the AU itself, because that also requires a lot of commitment in terms of consolidating the agenda within the AU itself. Of course, 2020, there are a number of opportunities that have emerged. A number of policies need to be revised, including the African Peace and Security Architecture Roadmap, the Silencing the Guns Roadmap, which are all expiring in 2020, the Gender Peace and Security Program as well. So all these programs and policies coming to an end in 2020, it will also give us an opportunity to reflect further on how this Women, Peace and Security agenda can be well captured and well reflected in follow-up policies, and how the design of upcoming policies can very much capture the Women, Peace and Security agenda. And finally, the issues related with COVID-19 and have been very much unprecedented challenges have also emerged with COVID-19. This, of course, will also have impact on Women, Peace and Security agenda. But again, this is also an opportunity for us to rethink security beyond the traditional understanding, to also include emerging threats and risks, including pandemics, climate change, and natural disasters. And there's also a need to really conceptualize the Women, Peace and Security agenda within this broader kind of emerging issues. So this is, I would like to conclude by this final kind of points. And if there is any kind of question from the floor, I would also like to invite now participants to if you have any comments, if you have any questions and suggestions, please raise your hand and we can also allow you to speak. Yes, you have the floor.
我们能显示吗？我没开是吗？ Thank you. I'm very honored to attend this meeting. Chinese government highly appreciates the great achievements made by the African Union and African countries in protecting women's rights and interests. Could you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. And there is a Chinese saying that women can support half of the sky. 25 years ago, the powerful message of the Fourth World Conference on Women held in Beijing has unleashed many positive changes. The social standards of women is significantly higher. Indeed, gender equality and women's empowerment are now important goals of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. At a high-level meeting on the 25th anniversary of the Fourth World Conference on Women, Chinese President Xi announced that in the coming 5 years, China will donate another $10 million to UN Women and will continue to fund the UNESCO Prize for Girls and Women's Education. President Xi also announces that China has implemented all proposals put forward in the Global Leaders Meeting on Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment 5 years ago, including donation of $10 million to UN Women, building 100 health projects for women and children, and 100 happy campus projects, and providing vocational training for 130 women in developing countries. Women and girls in many countries have benefited from these commitments and actions, thus fulfilling their dreams for work, education, and a better life. This fully demonstrates China's active contribution to global women's development. This year, the spread of COVID-19 worldwide has taken a heavy toll on economy, empowerment, employment, and people's life, and has brought greater challenges in both containing COVID-19 and promoting the post-COVID economic and social recovery. It is particularly important that we address the special needs of women and deliver on the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Africa. The course of women's development is an ongoing process, and actions for gender equality are always needed, no matter how the times and the international situation may change. Countries' commitment to promoting gender equality and women's aspiration for better lives will not change. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the intervention and for the comments. And now I would like to give the floor to Ambassador Hadiza. You have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you very much, Pitani, for this excellent presentation. And thank you, Amani, for helping us bridge the gap between policy and research. This is much appreciated. Thank you also for your support in providing intellectual content to our work and for keeping the gender agenda on the hot banner. I really want to appreciate all the previous speakers, especially Madam Hannah Tete and my dear sister Binata for all the excellent work that they have been doing. I want to say that I find the recommendations in your report very, very succinct, and I want to commit that we in the Office of the Chairperson have read it with much interest, and that we will be very happy and committed to work together with all the departments and to work together with the envoy to see to the implementation. I especially like the tracking of implementation of decisions, especially decisions of the peace and security. And thank you, Ambassador Osama, for really in your 1 month, you have brought this issue twice. Thank you very much for partnering with Amani to do this. I think that if all of us work together to make good our decisions, like Ms. Hannah Tete said, it is not only to now make these decisions, we need to implement. I think one of the biggest problems we must admit at the Commission ourselves is the implementation of our decisions. I think that I challenge you, Amani, to come up with ways and means that we can improve implementation of decisions. So in general, I just want to add my voice in thanking you for this review. And like I said, there's always this gap that we need to fill. You make us accountable. Think tanks like you make us accountable. And I really thank you for this good work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Hadiza, and those points are well taken. Thank you very much. And I think to also partly to answer to your question is that this report also is an attempt to also support this implementation process, and in terms of documenting really the major decisions and the major outcomes of the PSC decisions in the past 10 years. And it's also our the attempt we made to encourage and to support the implementation process. Of course, we will do more, particularly in collaboration with the relevant mandate holders who are present today as well. And thank you for noting that. I would like to give now the floor to Ambassador Matata. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, moderator. I wish to thank all the presenters and of course the summary of the findings of the report. I have two small questions and one recommendation. The first question is how much the Women in Peace and Security program has actually been mainstreamed in AGA, knowing that there's no way now we can avoid building the synergy between AGA and AUPSC. My second small question is, what have been the challenges of actually consolidating the Women, Peace and Security program within the Commission? That question is interesting because we may have the same concern when it comes to the regional economic communities. And from our own perspective, I think we are struggling to make sure that all the departments within the Secretariat of our organization are really looking at the Women, Peace and Security as an important program. My recommendation is something to do with what you just said when you raised the issue of having all these roadmaps ending by 2020. Perhaps this is the opportunity for the Women and Peace and Security program to go ahead and actually influence the development of the next roadmap in all aspects. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Matata. I will also give maybe later on, we will have all the questions first and we will have the answers later on. But thank you for the comments. I would like to give now the floor to, I see Catherine, you have the floor.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and also Bitanya, thank you for your presentations, and especially also to Amani for a lot of food for thought. And we celebrate 20 years of Agenda 2025, as had been mentioned, and there has been an important achievement that we want to celebrate. But we also feel that we need to look beyond anniversaries and celebrations, and we must make sure that we get back to work despite the challenges of COVID. We want to make sure together that we can, in 5, 10, or 20 years, we will look back and not look at implementation gaps again. And we will hopefully then be able to look back at what we will have further achieved: gender equality and respect for women's rights and their equal participation in all decision-making processes. Like SRSG Tete said, let's work together and to commit to setting this bar higher. We have mentioned it, and we have to work together to fight for women and girls to have their seat at the table. And my government, I don't want to be long, my government has and will continue initiatives on the gender in Africa, in New York, as supporters of the African Women's Leaders at Work, and also to FemWise, and I'm very hopeful and convinced that we will work together in future to keep going. Thank you very much, and thank you, Amani.
Thank you very much, Catherine, for that comment. Now we have, I think, is it from the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ethiopia? You have the floor.
Hello?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for giving me the floor. And as Ethiopia is very much committed to bring women's potential and capacity in all decision makings and all activities, this is a very important and timely program. As we know that in Ethiopia, the participation of women in every aspect has been elevated recently. It has been about more than 50% of decision making has been by women, starting from the presidential level, federal president level, to cabinet, and all down decision making processes. Women are involved in a very good number, even though we believe that we have to work a lot hard still. And in peace and security realization, as the Chinese delegation put it right, more than 50% of this world is going to be, or it is really dependent on women, and having the issue of women is very vital for humankind. So we have to work really hard, both bilateral, multilateral, and individual country capacity level. So this is very, very, very appreciable issue, and it's good that this program has been twice in the month's time. It is really nothing is more important than discussing on bringing women to the decision-making level. In that regard, even though we believe that in Ethiopia, where women these days are participating in high decision levels, it's always good to have institutionalized and well-organized approach of bringing women into the decision-making process. So we strongly support and agree with Amani the way it is doing, the way, and even the report itself. So we think that, we believe that it is very helpful, and we have to work in this manner. And the leadership that has been given in Amani by Dr. Solomon we appreciate that one, and still every one of us have to support and work closely so that we can bring more and more women in every aspect to decision making, so that the world can be peaceful, prosperous, and we can live a peaceful life. Thank you very much. This is only to add our voice that we agree and we support the institution. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the words of encouragement and for the comments as well, and as well as for sharing the case of women's representation in the case of Ethiopia. Thank you very much. And I think we have more, yes, people to speak. Ruth, you have the floor. Ruth, you may speak. We can't hear you. Ruth, we can't hear you. We are breaking up a bit. Can you please?
Tanya, this is Ruth from the Irish Embassy.
Okay. Ruth, can you hear us? Ruth, can you hear us? Okay. Ruth, I think we are not able to hear you, but I encourage anyone else who would like to take the floor. If you have any comments, again, please, I would welcome you. And if you have any comments for the speakers in general about the session, please let us know. You can raise your hands and we will let you speak. If there is no additional maybe comments from the floor, I will give the floor to our speakers, maybe to respond to some of the comments that were directed at them. So maybe SRSG Hannah Tete, maybe I'll start from you since you started this panel, and maybe to have maybe some of the concluding points, concluding remarks, and to answer some of the comments that came from the floor. You have the floor.
Well, thank you very much. The remarks were generally not directed at me, but I think that the point that we should include the women, peace and security agenda in the African governance architecture is a valid one. While we talk about the African peace and security architecture, we must recognize that governance and peace and security fundamentally go together. And so to be able to see how we can better connect, especially on issues of post-conflict reconstruction and development, where governance is key. I think that should be a new area for us to look at and to concentrate more efforts in that space, because it will help us with the consolidation in terms of moving from negotiating peace agreements to their implementation, to ensuring that that transitional process of post-conflict reconstruction and development has a woman focus or has a gender focus also in that process. Many panelists and many participants have bemoaned the fact that we are short on implementation. Implementation is something that has to take place at the governance level. And it's important for us to take on that responsibility and to see how we are going to actualize it. Because what we see across our continent today, when you look at our young women as well as our young men on the streets protesting, on the streets organizing, being activists, trying to promote and to advance their causes, they're no longer waiting to ask to be seated at the table. They are demanding their space. And if we want to be able to move this increased activism and focus in a productive way, in a way that it helps to grow our economies, in the way it helps to consolidate our democratic structures, we have to be much more proactive about inclusion so that we don't find ourselves overtaken by events. And thank you very much to my co-panelist, Her Excellency, Madam Diop. Once again to Ambassador Osama for having organized this. Amani, for your very thorough analysis of the performance over the last 10 years, and all who have made their contributions in the course of this discussion. They are well noted, and we will also take it into consideration in the work that we do with the African Union. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, and Atete, for those concluding remarks. And now I would like to give the floor to Madame Diop to also answer some of the questions regarding, I think, the challenges around gender mainstreaming, but also one of the participants mentioned about the opportunities with this in 2020 with the new roadmaps and new policies that will be revised and adopted for the coming years, and how the Women, Peace and Security agenda will feature in those policies, and any other final comments you may have. You have the floor.
Thank you, Bitanya. And again, let me congratulate Amani Africa for the quality of the work and that you just exposed to us. And I think it's, as Ambassador Hadiza have said, we will take it within the African Union and, you know, look at how we can see the implementation. And it's linked also to the issue of coordination within which you have highlighted, better coordination for building synergy and better delivering together. So I think also we need to recognize the fact that the African Union have also deployed. Maybe when I started, there were few representation of women in our different offices. But when I look at now what Madagascar, Cote d'Ivoire, Chad, Libya, DRC, Gabon, just those 6 countries where we have, and DRC recently, women leading the office. I think we have to push. We said that 2025 we should have parity at many levels of the African Union, but we will be tracking those indicators in our own report. We have also representation in New York and Washington, but also most of the advisors of the chairperson was himself have deliberately put women in his cabinet, including Ambassador Hadiza. And all this we tracking to make sure that they reflect in our report, and we make sure that the African Union Commission also deliver. When it comes to the issue of AUPSC and highlight by COMESA, and how much we working between AUPSC and AGA, and I think it's the time that we can look at how that connection, now that in the reform, the two are together. Again, it comes to the issue of coordination, better coordination. We have been working with the political department on looking into elections, because we know that elections are the most difficult part in terms of violence. It's happening right now, and those who are at the front are the women of this continent. We've seen it in Cote d'Ivoire, we've seen it in Guinea right now, we see it in many other places when elections are happening. Violence is there, but violence against women is also being used during those pre-election and sometime post-election. So I think that looking into how women, peace and security is cross-cutting or mainstream into the AGA is also something we need to look at as well. I wanted also to emphasize the need to make sure that, you know, the best practices that are happening Of course, we name and shame when it's not happening. For example, those who don't have laws that are protecting women, we know one good practice is in Liberia because of their experience, or even in Rwanda. But we need to look at those countries that have put practical laws and they are implementing it. And good practices like one-stop centers, which reconstruct the body and the mind of the women. Wherever I go in Solidarity Mission, the first thing in areas of conflict is to look into what kind of space, safe space are created for women that can respond. Not just the policy, but make sure that they have the legal support, they have the reconstruction support, but they have also the fight against the impunity. What kind of justice is there? How many women are in the system, etc. So we need to go beyond, looking into practical example that exists and how those examples can be also shared with other countries. Recently, I was in Rwanda with two governments in Africa that wanted to look at how, even when it comes to testing on DNA, when violence against women happen, Rwanda have now the instrument to test immediately and the perpetrators, but also the survivors or the victims. Those are critical things that we need to look at deep when we are talking into implementation, and how member states can learn from those and be able to apply them as well. When it comes, for example, during election, we create what they call the peace hut, or where women can sit and discuss. Of course, they are the majority of voters, but how you make sure that also they contribute into peaceful elections as well. And I think this was good practices. We need to make sure that we implement them in all our countries linked to women, peace, and security. A very good example also is Ethiopia, for having a minister for peace. I think this is the first in Africa, and we need to recognize and look at how that ministry is going to address the peace within the Ethiopia, and how it is working with the different ministries and different constituents to make sure that peace happen in there by preventing, like silencing the gun, because it's about process of prevention as well. I think this is good example, practical. It exists in Africa, and sometimes using our indigenous knowledge for prevention, for early warning, and we need to make sure that we implement those. So I think that the report should also take into consideration those good practices that can be replicated and leapfrog in different way as well. So I recommend that our regional, like COMESA and others, that are looking beyond the 3 pillars, but post-conflict reconstruction, we can invest as well. And my sister Anna Tete talked about the peace fund, and I think we need to access more within the budget to go beyond just maintaining, getting out of the conflict, but maintaining peace. That's and investing on the women reconstruction project as well. And I think that is very important when we are merging AUPSC and AGA. The rest, I think it's contribution. I'm very happy that your recommendation and the support by China, by the Embassy of Germany, which is, and on that not when it comes to women leadership. I think what is important that we, for the time being, we are going at the table in an ad hoc basis. I have been in many peace negotiations, but we are not invited at the table, but women push the door and eventually sit at the table. But what we need to do to make sure that it happens in Africa, and it's within the AGA, is the leadership of women in all sectors. You know, if Madam Anna Tete was not ministers fighting a politician and ministers of foreign affairs of her country, now she's sitting where she's sitting because she has that career to make sure as leader of her continent tomorrow, she can be the head of state and she will take the issue of women, peace and security as a leader. And I'm not saying leader at top, it's leader even at the grassroots level, it's leader everywhere. So if we have women in the diplomatic career leading, if we have ambassadors, if we have women in the political spheres, if we have women leader in all the mechanism, so when it comes to peace negotiation, you know, eventually the women will be sitting there because they will represent their constituents. So I think leadership, and that's why I think the work that we are doing with the Germany and other actors that here to make sure that the leadership of women counts in Africa. I think that is where you know, we appreciate the work of women in governance, just within the AGA, but other spheres like the AUPSC as well. Merci beaucoup. Thank you so much, and much appreciated as well.
Thank you very much, Madame Diop, for those very powerful words and for giving us really a very good overview of, in terms of what more can be done, particularly on the points you raised around the documenting best practices and how we can learn from different countries, learning from one another. We don't talk enough about our good practices and the best practices that we have in the continent. That is absolutely important. And in terms of also the various AUPSC components supporting the gender, the women, peace and security agenda as well, that is absolutely important. And the issues you raised around the leadership and women representation in governance, in peace, in conflict prevention, in all kind of, in mediation and post-conflict construction. And just one final point from my side, although there were not many questions directed at me, but I just want to also welcome some of the points that were raised by Ambassador Osama, particularly around the priority on implementation, which he also made reference to the 2018 PSC decision. That is very important in terms of follow-up, and it's very encouraging to hear from Ambassador Osama on those points. And as well, the points mentioned by Madame Diop, as well as Ambassador Hadiza, on how we can implement some of the recommendations that were identified in our report. And particularly when we're designing and when we're preparing this report, we have the main targets for this report, of course, are the key mandate holders within the African Union. And it's very encouraging to hear that you know, the right people have welcomed this report and the recommendations. And of course, we are always available in terms of following up and supporting the implementation of this key policy recommendations. I think from my side, I would like to reiterate again and say thank you very much for our esteemed speakers. Her Excellency Hannah Tete, as well as Madame Diop, for their excellent statements and interventions. I would also like to thank Ambassador Osama and his team as well for jointly organizing this launch and to jointly organize this report launch. And now I'd like to give the floor to Dr. Salomon for the final remarks and for conclusions. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Bitania. Excellency, Ambassador Osama, Chairperson of the PSC for the month of October, Excellency SRSG Hannah Tete, Excellency Madame Diop, I would really like to express my deep appreciation at Amani Africa for your very eloquent and rich statements in respect of where we are with respect to the Women, Peace and Security agenda, both in respect of the 20th anniversary of 1325 of the UN, but also in respect to the Women, Peace and Security agenda of the Peace and Security Council, which marks also its 10 years this year. It has been extremely enlightening and also very encouraging for us to hear not only highlights of the progress that have been achieved in respect of the implementation of 1325, but also the PSC Women, Peace and Security agenda, including in terms of the development of the various national action plans. But also, I think within the framework of the African Union, the richness of the normative and policy instruments in respect to the rights of women, gender equality, and the Women, Peace and Security agenda is incredible. And that follow-up within the framework of the Peace and Security Council, particularly the establishment of the Office of the Special Envoy, has been a landmark turning point in terms of really mobilizing the wide African Union system towards living up to the pronouncements that are made in the various spheres within the African Union system, within the Peace and Security Council, but also the rich normative instruments that Bitania made reference to. I think, if I am not mistaken, I can say that as far as the thematic agenda of the Peace and Security Council is concerned, perhaps this is one of the few, if not the only one, that has achieved a high level of institutionalization from the thematic agenda items of the PSC, with the establishment of the Office of the Special Envoy, with the establishment of a program within the Peace and Security Department, with the establishment of FemWise, I think, and also the expansion of representation of women in the field offices of the African Union. These are all very important levels of institutionalization and progress that have been achieved. But I think the gap we have is so huge, so enormous, that these achievement and progress that we have made can never at all satisfy the expectations and demands, and indeed the level of commitment set in the normative and policy instruments. There is a long way ahead in the various contexts that across the continent. In the context of COVID-19, sexual and gender-based violence has been reported as disintegrating, as degenerating into a pandemic within the COVID-19 pandemic. And it clearly demonstrated, I think, moments of crisis show us how far we are behind in terms of really realizing some of the normative standards. And COVID-19 highlighted that. And it tells us that unless and otherwise we address issues of gender inequality and gender oppression in times of peace, in normal conditions, in times of crisis, it becomes very difficult to address it. So much of the work actually needs to be done at that level. And we do hope that with the Women, Peace and Security agenda and 1325, and with the partnerships that have been indicated, including, as Madam Diop mentioned, the Women Leaders Network, not necessarily as a state-centric network, but as a network that brings together various women leaders from across different walks of life. I think those are the kinds of the various centers of power across our societies need to be tapped into in order to move this forward. And indeed, the work that we did today in joining hands with Ambassador Osama as the chairperson of the PSC at Amani is a demonstration that this is something that we can take forward and achieve only if we bring together all the resources, all the capacities, not just within states and within intergovernmental processes, but also outside those intergovernmental processes in the private sector, in civil society, in trade unions, women movements and groups, all of that to be tapped into. With that, I wish to once again express my deep appreciation to Ambassador Osama and the Embassy of Egypt, his team, for giving us the honor of joining the PhD during the course of this month in organizing this event and in also producing the special research report, for which I would like to thank and recognize the work that Britannia has done. I also wish to thank and indeed express my deep gratitude to you, SRSG Hannah, and also to you, Special Envoy Diop, for the work that you do. All of us look up to you, and you inspire a generation that is very restless, as we can see across the continent, for taking matters into its own hands, but also for demanding dignity and being treated with dignity. So we thank you for that. I also wish to recognize at this point the support that we have received for the production of this special research report from the Embassy of Finland. We appreciate your partnership. I also wish to thank all our partners. I'm happy to hear the voice of Katrin from the Embassy of Germany, who joined us and also expressed her perspectives, also provided us input for the Embassy of Germany, for the partnership as well, Embassy of Switzerland, as well as the Embassy of the United Kingdom. We thank you so much for your support and your partnership. I can't end my concluding remarks without, of course, thanking all colleagues in the African Union system and indeed members of the Peace and Security Council and the wider African Union. Thank you so very much, and we look forward to take this forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Everyone have a great day.
Thank you very much, and bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.